6 years ago, Lena Voss told the most dangerous man in Chicago that their baby was dead, and then she disappeared. Tonight, she's serving his table. Adrian Morello doesn't forget faces, especially not the woman who destroyed him. But what he doesn't know, what nobody knows, is that their daughter is very much alive, tucked into a cramped apartment on the south side while Lena works double shifts to keep them hidden. One glance across a candlelit room, and 6 years of carefully built lies are about to shatter. If you want to see how far desperation can push a mother, and how deep betrayal can cut a man who's already lost everything, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The dining room at Aurelio's smelled like old money and new wine. Lena Voss moved between the tables with practiced invisibility, her black apron tied tight, her hair pulled back so severely it made her temples ache. She'd perfected the art of being nobody, just hands that delivered plates, a voice that murmured, "Of course," and right away, without inflection. 6 years of waitressing had taught her that the less people noticed you, the safer you were. Tonight should have been easy. A private party in the back room, 8 guests, prix-fixe menu. The kind of shift that paid well and ended early. She could be home by 10, relieve Mrs. Chen from the apartment next door, and curl up on the couch with Mila watching that cartoon about the singing mice for the 100th time. Lena was folding napkins into swans, a stupid requirement for management, when Marcus, the floor manager, grabbed her elbow. His fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "You're on the Morello party." The napkin crumpled in her fist. "What?" "Gianna called in sick. You're the only one who can handle a table that size." Marcus was already walking away, dismissing her shock as irrelevant. Morello. The name hit her like a fist to the sternum. It couldn't be. Chicago had dozens of Morellos. It was a common enough name in Italian circles. It didn't mean anything. But her hands were shaking as she smoothed her apron. Her reflection in this polished bar mirror looked pale, washed out under the amber lighting. 28 years old, and she looked exhausted. The kind of tired that came from working 60-hour weeks and lying awake every night wondering if today would be the day her past finally caught up. "Table's being seated now," Marcus called over his shoulder. "Move." The private dining room was all dark wood and leather, the kind of place where deals got made and secrets got buried. Lena pushed through the door with a water pitcher in one hand and a basket of bread in the other, her customer service smile fixed in place. She made it 3 steps before she saw him. Adrian Morello sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his territory. 6 years had carved him into something sharper. The boyish softness she remembered was gone, replaced by hard angles and a jaw that looked like it could cut glass. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. His dark hair was shorter now, styled with the kind of careless perfection that only came from expensive barbers. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Gray, like a winter sky before a storm. And they were locked directly on her face. The pitcher slipped, water sloshed over the rim, soaking her sleeve. Someone at the table laughed, a brittle sound that barely registered through the white noise suddenly flooding her ears. "Careful there," one of the guests said, a woman in diamonds that caught the light every time she moved. "These tablecloths are Italian silk." "I'm so sorry." Lena's voice came out strangled. She set the pitcher down with shaking hands, grabbed a napkin, dabbed uselessly at the spreading wet spot. "I'll bring fresh linens right away." "Don't bother." Adrian's voice cut through the murmured conversation like a blade through silk, smooth, controlled, and absolutely lethal. "Everyone out." The table went silent. "Adrian," the diamond woman started. "Out." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Men like Adrian Morello didn't shout. They spoke once, and the world rearranged itself to comply. Chairs scraped. The 7 other guests exchanged glances that ranged from curious to concerned, but nobody argued. They filed out in expensive shoes and designer clothes, and someone closed the door behind them with a soft click that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. Lena stood frozen by the table, the soggy napkin still clutched in her fist. Her throat felt like someone had packed it with cotton. "Run!" her instinct screamed. The door was right there. She could move, could bolt, could... "Sit down, Lena." She didn't move. Couldn't. Her legs had turned to concrete. Adrian stood in one fluid motion. He moved around the table with the unhurried grace of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to go. When he got close, too close, Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. She finally unstuck her feet and stumbled backward. Her hip hit the edge of a server's cart. Glassware rattled. "It's been 6 years," Adrian said quietly. "You look good." That was a lie. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman running on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee, wearing a uniform that had seen better days and shoes with worn-down heels. But she lifted her chin anyway, forced herself to meet those gray eyes, even though everything in her screamed to look away. "I don't know what you think this is." "Don't." The single word cracked like a whip. Adrian moved closer, and this time she had nowhere to go. The server's cart pressed into her spine. "Don't insult both of us by pretending you don't know exactly what this is." Her pulse hammered in her throat. "I'm just trying to work. If you want to file a complaint about the service, where is she?" The question landed like a grenade. For a second, one horrible, stretched out second, Lena thought about playing dumb. But the look on Adrian's face killed that idea before it fully formed. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. "I don't—" "Her name is Mila." Adrian's voice dropped to something soft and dangerous. "She's 5 years old, brown hair, brown eyes, likes that cartoon with the mice, has a birthmark on her left shoulder that looks like a comma." The room tilted. Lena grabbed the cart to keep from falling. "How do you really thought I wouldn't find out?" Something like pain flickered across his face before the mask snapped back into place. "You told me she died. You let me believe I lost them both, you and the baby, and then you just disappeared." "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." He was close enough now that she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, the barely controlled fury radiating off him in waves. "Explain to me why you lied, why you've been hiding my daughter for 5 goddamn years. Explain to me why I had to hear about her from a private investigator instead of from you." Lena's mind raced. A private investigator? How long had he been looking? How much did he actually know? And more importantly, what was he going to do about it? "I did what I had to do," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "To protect her." "From me?" It wasn't a question. "From your world." She met his eyes, refusing to back down even though her knees felt like water. "From the violence, the danger, You don't get to make that choice alone." Adrian's hand slammed down on the table, making the glassware jump. "She's my daughter." "She's my daughter!" The words burst out before she could stop them. "I'm the one who carried her, who gave birth to her alone in a county hospital because I had nobody. I'm the one who's been working 3 jobs to keep a roof over her head and food in her stomach. I'm the one who sits up with her when she has nightmares, who reads her bedtime stories, who lied to her about her father." That stopped her cold. Adrian's expression shifted into something she couldn't quite read. "What did you tell her about me?" Lena's throat closed up. The truth was, she'd told Mila almost nothing, that her father was gone, that some questions didn't have good answers, that it was just the 2 of them, and that was enough. "She deserves to know where she comes from," Adrian said, and his voice had gone quiet again. That was worse than the anger. "She deserves to know me." You can't just—" Lena started, but he cut her off. "I can do whatever I want." He straightened, putting a few feet of space between them, and the shift felt calculated, like he was giving her room to breathe so she could think clearly about how thoroughly trapped she was. "But I'm not unreasonable. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take me to her, tonight, and we're going to figure this out like adults." "No." The word came out fierce, final. "You're not going anywhere near her. That's not your call anymore. The hell it isn't. I've been her mother for 5 years. You've been nothing." The words hit him like a physical blow. She saw him flinch, saw something crack in that careful control. But when he spoke again, his voice was ice. "Get your things. We're leaving." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then showed her the screen. It was a photo. Mila, sitting at their kitchen table, tongue stuck out in concentration as she colored. The angle suggested it had been taken from outside their apartment window. Lena's blood turned to sleet. "You've been watching us." "I've been protecting what's mine." He pocketed the phone. "Whether you like it or not, now move." She should have screamed, should have fought, caused a scene, called the cops. But some instinct older than logic told her that wouldn't end well. Men like Adrian Morello didn't make threats they couldn't back up. And if he'd been watching their apartment, he knew where they lived, knew Mila's schedule, knew everything. She was trapped, and they both knew it. I need to tell my manager. Already done. Adrian gestured to the door. Marcus thinks you have a family emergency, which, technically, you do. The ride to his car was a blur. She was vaguely aware of Marcus watching them leave, concern creasing his forehead, but Adrian's hand was on the small of her back, light enough to look polite, firm enough to communicate that running wasn't an option. The car was waiting at the curb, sleek, black, expensive. A driver stood by the rear door, his face professionally blank. "I need to get Mila," Lena said as Adrian guided her toward the vehicle. "She's with a neighbor. I can't just... Already taken care of." Her head snapped toward him. "What?" "My people picked her up 20 minutes ago. She's safe." The world dropped out from under her. "You took my daughter?" "Our daughter." Adrian opened the car door. "And yes, get in." Lena's hands curled into fists. Every maternal instinct she had was screaming at her to fight, to claw, to do whatever it took to get to Mila. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had kept them alive and hidden for 5 years, knew that fighting would accomplish nothing. Adrian held all the cards. He had Mila. He had resources. He had power. All she had was desperation. She got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and money. Adrian slid in beside her, and the door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like fate sealing itself. The driver pulled away from the curb without a word. "If you've heard her," Lena started. "She's fine. Better than fine, actually. Last I checked, she was having ice cream with my sister." "Your sister?" "Gianna. She has 3 kids of her own, knows how to handle a scared 5-year-old. Adrian's voice softened fractionally. "She's not scared, by the way. Mila. Apparently she thinks she's on an adventure." That sounded like Mila. Brave, curious, utterly fearless in ways that terrified Lena on a daily basis. She'd gotten that from her father. "Where are we going?" "My place. We need to talk without interruption." Adrian pulled out his phone again, scrolled through something. "And you need to see that she's okay." Lena watched the city slide past the window. They were heading north into the neighborhoods where the buildings got taller and the lights got brighter. Old money territory. The kind of place where people like her only entered through service entrances. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "About Mila." Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he finally answered, his voice was carefully neutral. 3 months? Give or take. 3 months. He'd known for 3 months and hadn't made a move until tonight. That didn't fit the Adrian she remembered. The one who acted on impulse and instinct, who loved fast and fought hard. 6 years had changed him, made him patient. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. "Why wait?" she asked. "Because I needed to be sure. And because I needed to know why you did it." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in those gray eyes made her want to disappear into the leather seat. "I've spent 3 months trying to understand what would make you lie about something like this. And I still don't have an answer that makes sense. I told you, I was protecting her." "From what? Me?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I loved you, Lena. I would have given you anything, would have moved mountains to keep you both safe. But you didn't give me the chance. You just left." The accusation hung in the air between them. She wanted to explain, to make him understand the terror that had driven her away. The night she'd overheard his father talking about the family business, the violence, the bodies, the enemies who'd use any weakness they could find. The way his mother had looked at her like she was something disposable. But how could she explain that to a man who'd grown up in that world, who probably thought it was normal? "You wouldn't understand," she said finally. "Try me." Before she could answer, the car pulled up in front of a building that looked like it cost more than every place Lena had ever lived combined. Glass and steel stretched up into the night sky, lit from within like a beacon. The driver opened her door, and Adrian was already out, waiting. "Come on," he said. "She's upstairs." The lobby was all marble and modern art. A security guard nodded at Adrian with the kind of deference reserved for people who owned the building. Which, Lena realized as they stepped into a private elevator, he probably did. "Penthouse," Adrian said, and the elevator began to rise. Lena's stomach dropped with every floor they passed. She'd spent 5 years building a life for Mila, small, cramped, but safe. Now Adrian was going to show her daughter this world of wealth and power, and how could she compete with that? How could a 2-bedroom apartment with water stains on the ceiling compete with a penthouse in the sky? The elevator opened directly into an apartment that looked like something out of a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. Modern furniture arranged with the kind of casual perfection that took professional decorators. And in the middle of it all, sitting cross-legged on an obscenely expensive rug, was Mila. She was building something with blocks, expensive wooden ones, not the plastic kind Lena bought at discount stores, while a dark-haired woman watched from the couch. The woman looked up when the elevator opened, and her face broke into a smile that was so much like Adrian's it was unsettling. "There you are," she said, standing. "She's been perfect. Haven't you, sweetheart?" Mila looked up, and when she saw Lena, her face lit up. "Mama!" She scrambled to her feet and ran, launching herself into Lena's arms with the total confidence of a child who'd never doubted she'd be caught. Lena held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of the strawberry shampoo they used, feeling the solid weight of her daughter's body and knowing that everything was about to change. "I'm okay, Mama," Mila said into her shoulder. "The nice lady gave me ice cream, 3 scoops." "That's wonderful, baby," Lena's voice cracked. She pulled back to look at Mila's face, checking for any sign of fear or distress, but her daughter just grinned up at her, gap-toothed and delighted. "And she let me play with her phone. I watched the mouse cartoon." "Mila, you shouldn't—" "It's fine," Gianna said, coming over. She was beautiful in the effortless way rich women were, her clothes casual but clearly expensive. "Hi, I'm Gianna, Adrian's sister." She extended a hand and Lena shook it automatically. "It's good to finally meet you." Finally. Like she'd been expected. Like this was some normal family gathering instead of a kidnapping disguised as reconciliation. Lena tightened her hold on Mila. "We should go. It's past her bedtime." "Actually," Adrian said from behind her, "you're staying here tonight." She spun around. "Excuse me?" "Your apartment isn't safe anymore." His expression was unreadable. "Too many people know about it now. About her. Until I can figure out how to handle this, you're both staying here. You can't just—" "I can, and I am." He crouched down to Mila's level, and Lena watched her daughter's eyes go wide. "Hi, Mila. I'm Adrian. I'm a friend of your mom's." Mila studied him with the serious consideration only children could manage. "You're very tall." Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You're very observant." "Mama says that too." Mila tilted her head. "Are you really her friend?" "She doesn't have very many." Something in Lena's chest cracked, out of the mouths of babes. "We used to be very good friends," Adrian said carefully. "A long time ago." "Why aren't you friends anymore?" "That's complicated, sweetheart," Lena cut in before Adrian could answer. "And it's way past your bedtime." "But I'm not tired." Mila's protest was cut off by a yawn that made a liar out of her. "Come on." Gianna stood, gathering up a bag that Lena hadn't noticed before. "I had my assistant put together some things for her. Pajamas, toothbrush, that kind of thing. The guest room's all set up." She led them down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. The guest room was bigger than Lena's entire apartment, with a bed that looked like a cloud and toys already arranged on shelves. Someone had thought of everything. It was terrifying. Lena got Mila changed and tucked in, reading her the bedtime story that Gianna had somehow known to include in the bag of supplies. By the time she finished, Mila was already drifting, her eyes heavy. "Mama," she mumbled, "is this a dream?" "No, baby. It's real. I like it here." Mila's eyes closed. "It's nice." Lena sat on the edge of the bed long after Mila's breathing evened out into sleep. Through the door, she could hear low voices, Adrian and his sister talking. About her. About Mila. About what came next. She should run, grab Mila and bolt while she had the chance. But where would she go? Adrian had found them once. He'd find them again. And now that he knew about Mila, now that he'd seen her, he wasn't going to let them go. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, Gianna was gone and Adrian was standing by those enormous windows, looking out at the city. He'd taken off his jacket, loosened his tie. The gesture made him look almost human, She's asleep, Lena said. Adrian nodded without turning around. Gianna left information for a pediatrician. Mila needs to be checked out. Make sure she's up to date on everything. She's fine. I take her to the clinic. A real doctor, Lena, not a free clinic. Now he did turn, and his expression was hard. She's my daughter. She's going to have the best of everything. She has everything she needs. Does she? Adrian moved closer, and Lena forced herself not to back away. Does she have new clothes that aren't hand-me-downs? Does she have her own room that doesn't have peeling paint and mold in the corners? Does she have anything beyond the bare minimum? She has a mother who loves her. She deserves that and more. His jaw tightened, and whether you like it or not, she's going to get it. They stared at each other in that expensive room with the city sprawled out below them like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. Lena thought about the life she'd built, small, careful, safe. And she thought about what Adrian could offer: wealth, power, protection. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. Adrian's expression shifted into something she couldn't read. "I want the truth. All of it. Why you really left. Why you lied. Why you thought keeping her from me was the right choice. And then what? Then we figure out how to move forward." He exhaled slowly. "Look, I'm angry. I'm furious, actually. But screaming at you isn't going to change what happened. Mila exists. She's here. And she needs both of us to be better than whatever the hell this is." Lena's throat felt tight. She'd expected rage, threats, maybe even violence. This measured calm was worse because it meant he was thinking clearly, making plans. "I can't stay here," she said. "You can. And you will. At least until I'm sure you're both safe." "Safe from what?" Adrian's expression went dark. "From the people who'd use her to get to me. Because the second word gets out that I have a daughter, she becomes a target. And I'm not losing her before I even get to know her." The weight of that settled over Lena like a blanket made of lead. She'd spent 5 years trying to keep Mila out of this world. And in one night, she'd been dragged right into the center of it. "I want to see my apartment," she said. "Get our things. Tomorrow. With security." I have a job. You don't need it anymore. You can't just watch me." Adrian moved past her toward the kitchen. "There's food in the fridge if you're hungry. Your room is next to Mila's. Ensuite bathroom. Everything you need." "I didn't agree to any of this." He paused in the doorway, looked back at her. "You stopped having a choice the moment you decided to lie to me about my daughter. Now we're playing by different rules, my rules." His voice softened fractionally. "Get some sleep, Lena. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Then he was gone, disappearing down another hallway, leaving her alone in a living room that cost more than she'd make in a decade. Lena sank onto the couch and dropped her head into her hands. 6 years of running, of hiding, of building a life out of nothing, and it had all collapsed in a single night. Adrian knew about Mila. He had them both here, in his territory, under his control. And the worst part, the part that made her want to scream, was that she couldn't even say he was wrong. Their apartment wasn't safe anymore. Her job barely paid enough to cover rent and food. Mila deserved better. But this world of money and power and violence lurking just beneath the surface, this was what she'd been running from all along. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, pale light was filtering through those enormous windows, and someone was moving in the kitchen. Lena jerked upright, momentarily disoriented, before the events of the previous night came rushing back. Adrian was making coffee. He'd changed into worn jeans and a t-shirt that made him look younger, less dangerous. The illusion shattered when she saw the gun holstered at the small of his back. "Morning," he said without looking at her. "Coffee? Is Mila still asleep? I checked on her an hour ago." He poured 2 cups, brought one over. "We need to talk." Lena accepted the coffee because she needed something to do with her hands. It was good, better than the instant stuff she bought in bulk from the discount store. Adrian sat across from her, cradling his own mug. "My family wants to meet her." "No." It wasn't a request. He held up a hand before she could protest. "Lena, I've kept this quiet for 3 months while I figured out what to do. But my father knows. My mother knows. And they want to meet their granddaughter." The thought of Mila meeting the Morello family, the same people whose conversations had terrified Lena into running, made her stomach turn. She's 5 years old. She doesn't need to be dragged into family politics. She's already in them, whether you like it or not. Adrian leaned forward. Look, I get it. You're scared. But my family isn't what you think. They're not going to hurt her. Hell, they're probably going to spoil her rotten. That's not the point. Then what is? The point is she's innocent. The words burst out louder than she meant them to. She doesn't know about any of this. The business, the violence, the fact that her father is a criminal? Adrian's voice was flat. You can say it, Lena. I know what I am. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something in his eyes that made her chest ache. Resignation, like he'd accepted his place in the world and stopped fighting it. Is that why you never came looking for me? She asked quietly. Before, when you thought I was gone, because you thought I was better off without you? Adrian's jaw worked. I looked. For 2 years, I turned this city upside down trying to find you. Then I figured either you were dead or you didn't want to be found. Either way, he trailed off, shook his head. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Before he could respond, a door opened down the hall, and Mila appeared, rubbing her eyes. She was wearing the pajamas Gianna had provided, expensive ones with little stars on them, and her hair was a disaster of tangles. Mama? Her voice was small, uncertain. Lena was across the room in seconds, scooping her up. Right here, baby. I'm right here. Mila buried her face in Lena's shoulder, and for a moment she was just a scared kid who'd woken up in a strange place. But then she lifted her head, looked around, and her expression shifted to wonder. This place is so big, she breathed. Are we really staying here? For a little while, Lena said carefully. Cool. Mila wiggled down, her fear forgotten. She noticed Adrian and waved. Hi again. Hi again, Adrian said, and Lena heard the careful control in his voice, like he was trying not to spook a wild animal. Are you hungry? Mila nodded enthusiastically. How about pancakes? With chocolate chips? Adrian's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. I think that can be arranged. Lena watched him move into the kitchen with her daughter trailing behind, asking questions about everything. The fancy coffee maker, the huge refrigerator, why the windows were so big. And Adrian answered every single one with patience she hadn't known he possessed. This was the part she hadn't prepared for. The part where Adrian wasn't a threat or an enemy, but just a man trying to connect with his daughter. A man who'd missed 5 years of her life because Lena had taken it from him. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto a bar stool, watching them work together to mix pancake batter, and something in her chest cracked open. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe... A phone rang, shattering the moment. Adrian glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. I need to take this. He looked at Mila. Can you stir this while I'm gone? Don't let it get lumpy. I got it. Mila grabbed the spoon with both hands, suddenly very serious about her job. Adrian stepped out onto the balcony, and even through the glass, Lena could see the change in his posture. The softness vanished, replaced by the cold authority she remembered. He was gesturing sharply, voice raised just enough that she caught fragments. Don't care what he wants. Not negotiable. Handle it. When he came back inside, his face was a mask. Something came up. I need to go out for a few hours. We'll go too. No. The word was sharp. You stay here, both of you. Security's posted downstairs. Don't leave the apartment. You can't keep us prisoner, Kindlebo. I'm keeping you safe. There's a difference. He grabbed his jacket from where he'd draped it over a chair. I'll be back by lunch. Make yourselves at home. Then he was gone. The elevator doors closing behind him before Lena could form a protest. Mila looked up from her pancakes. Where'd he go? Work, Lena said, because what else could she say? Your father has a meeting, probably about illegal things, possibly dangerous things. But don't worry, we're just going to sit here in this golden cage and wait. They ate breakfast in that enormous kitchen, Mila chattering about how good the pancakes were, how she could see the whole city from the windows, how she hoped they could stay forever. And Lena smiled and nodded and tried not to think about how quickly her daughter was falling in love with the life she couldn't provide. Couldn't provide. That was the hell of it. She'd worked herself to exhaustion for 5 years trying to give Mila everything. But one night in Adrian's world, and it was clear, everything she'd done wasn't enough. would never be enough. The realization settled in her bones like frost. Hours crawled by. Lena tried to keep Mila entertained. They watched cartoons on a TV bigger than their couch back home, colored in expensive coloring books that had appeared from somewhere, played with toys that must have cost hundreds of dollars. And the whole time, Lena felt the walls closing in. When Adrian finally returned, it was past 2. He looked tired, his jaw tight with tension, but he softened when he saw Mila had fallen asleep on the couch, crayon still clutched in one hand. She was up late, Lena said quietly. The excitement caught up with her. Adrian nodded, moved to the couch, and carefully lifted Mila into his arms. She stirred but didn't wake, just curled into his chest like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Something in Lena's throat tightened as she watched him carry their daughter to the bedroom, lay her down gently, pull the blanket up to her chin. He stood there for a moment, just looking at her, and the expression on his face was so raw it hurt to witness. When he came back out, he closed the door carefully behind him. "We need to talk," he said. "Really talk." Lena nodded because there was no avoiding it anymore. They sat at opposite ends of that expensive couch, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. "Tell me," Adrian said finally. "Tell me why you left. And don't give me the bullshit about protecting her. I want the real reason." So she did. She told him about that night 6 years ago, when she'd overheard his father talking about a rival family, about the details, graphic, brutal details, of what happened to people who crossed them. She told him about his mother's cold assessment that Lena was a liability, that the pregnancy made things complicated, that maybe it would be better if she just disappeared. She told him about the fear that had gripped her, about realizing she was carrying a child into a world where life was cheap and loyalty was bought with blood. "I went to the clinic the next day," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Told them I'd miscarried, filed paperwork, made it official." She looked at her hands. "Then I left. Changed my name, moved to a different part of the city, started over." Adrian was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "My mother said those things? I'm sorry." "Don't be." He stood abruptly, paced to the windows. "I knew my family could be ruthless, but I didn't know—" He stopped, shoulders rigid. "Did she threaten you directly?" "No, but she didn't have to. I heard enough." Adrian's reflection in the glass looked haunted. "You should have told me." "Would it have changed anything?" He turned to face her. "I would have protected you." "From your own family?" Lena shook her head. "Adrian, you were 22. You were still trying to prove yourself to your father. What were you going to do?" "I don't know, but I would have done something." His hands curled into fists. "Instead, you made the choice for both of us." "I made the only choice I could." They stared at each other across that expensive living room, and Lena saw the moment something shifted in his eyes. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Understanding, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. "I can't change the past," she said, "but I did what I thought was right. For her, for me, maybe even for you." "That wasn't your decision to make." "Maybe not, but it's done." She stood, met his gaze directly. "So what now? Are you going to punish me for it? Take her away? Because if that's your plan, you should know I'll fight you with everything I have." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "I'm not taking her away from you." "Then what?" "I told you. We figure this out. Together." He moved closer, and there was something almost pleading in his voice. "I missed 5 years, Lena. 5 years of her life that I can never get back. First words, first steps, first everything. You took that from me." The accusation landed like a punch, because he was right. "But she's here now," he continued, "and she needs stability. She needs both of us to put aside our shit and figure out how to be parents. Can you do that?" Could she? Could she coexist with a man she'd spent 6 years running from? Could she share her daughter with someone whose world terrified her? "I don't know," she admitted. "Well, figure it out, because this isn't just about you and me anymore." His voice softened. "It's about her." And that was the truth she couldn't escape. Mila, with her gap-toothed smile and fearless curiosity. Mila, who deserved more than Lena's fear and Adrian's anger. Okay, she said finally, but I have conditions. I'm listening. I'm her mother. That doesn't change. Whatever arrangement we come to, I'm still the one who makes decisions about her care, her education, our decisions, Adrian interrupted. Not yours. Ours. Lena's jaw tightened. Fine. Ours. But I won't have her exposed to anything dangerous. No business meetings, no family drama, nothing that could put her at risk. Agreed. And I want my own space. An apartment nearby, maybe. Somewhere I can take her when we need time alone. Adrian considered that. I can arrange something in this building. You'll have your own place, but close enough that I can make sure you're both protected. It was more than she'd expected, maybe more than she deserved. And one more thing, she said. You have to tell me the truth. About your business, about what you do, all of it. Because if I'm going to trust you with her, I need to know what we're walking into. Adrian's expression went carefully blank. That's not non-negotiable, Lena said firmly. You want me to trust you? Prove you're trustworthy. They stared at each other, and she could see him calculating, weighing options. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but not today. Today, we focus on her. Tomorrow, he trailed off. Tomorrow we'll talk about the rest. It felt like a reprieve, or maybe just a delay. Either way, Lena would take it. The next morning started with a phone call that made Adrian's face go hard. He'd been making scrambled eggs, something Lena wouldn't have believed possible if she hadn't watched him crack the shells with practiced efficiency, when his phone buzzed across the counter. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. I need to take this. He stepped onto the balcony, sliding the glass door shut behind him. Mila was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a stuffed elephant that had appeared from somewhere overnight. She was talking to it in that serious way kids had, explaining the rules of some elaborate game only she understood. Lena watched Adrian through the glass. His shoulders were rigid, one hand raking through his hair in a gesture she remembered from years ago. Whatever the call was about, it wasn't good. When he came back inside, his expression was carefully neutral. The kind of blank that meant he was working overtime to keep something contained. Change of plans, he said. We're going out. Where? My parents' house. He said it like he was announcing a trip to the dentist. They want to meet Mila. Today. Lena's stomach dropped. No, we talked about this. I need more time. We don't have more time. Adrian moved to the stove, turned off the burner. My father's been patient. That call was him informing me, not asking. So we're going. You can't just... Lena. He turned to face her, and his voice was low enough that Mila couldn't hear. This is happening whether you like it or not. You can either come with me and help manage it, or I can take her myself. Your choice. The threat was clear, and the hell of it was, he wasn't bluffing. Fine. The word came out sharp. But if your mother says one thing that upsets her, we're leaving. Deal. They left an hour later after Adrian made some calls that resulted in a bag of clothes appearing for both Lena and Mila. Expensive stuff, tasteful, exactly the right sizes. Lena wanted to refuse on principle, but her waitress uniform was hardly appropriate for meeting the family, and Mila's excitement over a new dress with actual pockets killed any protest before it formed. The car ride took them out of the city proper and into the suburbs, where the houses had gates and the lawns looked like something from a magazine. Adrian was tense beside her, one hand drumming on his knee in a restless rhythm that betrayed his carefully controlled expression. Are you nervous? Lena asked quietly. No. Then after a pause, maybe. I don't know what they're going to say. About me? About all of it. He glanced back at Mila, who was absorbed in the window, watching the world slide past. My father's been pushing me to settle down, have kids, carry on the family legacy. He's going to see this as... He stopped, shook his head. It doesn't matter what he sees it as. But Lena heard what he didn't say. His father would see Mila as an opportunity, a tool. The next generation of whatever empire the Morellos had built on blood and broken bones. The car turned onto a private drive lined with trees that looked older than the city itself. At the end of it sat a house that made Adrian's penthouse look modest. Stone and glass, sprawling across perfectly manicured grounds, with a fountain out front that probably cost more than Lena's entire life savings. Jesus, she breathed. Yeah. Adrian's voice was flat. Welcome to the family. The front door opened before they even got out of the car. A woman emerged, petite, elegant, with dark hair going silver at the temples and eyes that missed nothing. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost thousands, and her smile was warm enough that Lena almost believed it was genuine. Almost. Adrian? She came down the steps with her arms extended. Finally. Adrian accepted the hug with the stiffness of someone who'd learned early that affection could be a weapon. Mother, this is Lena, and this must be Mila. The woman turned those sharp eyes on Lena's daughter, and something in her expression shifted, softened, just fractionally. Look at you, you have your father's eyes. Mila, who'd been holding Lena's hand in a death grip, relaxed slightly. Are you my grandma? I am. The woman crouched down, making herself small, non-threatening. My name is Francesca. It's very nice to meet you. Do you have cookies? Francesca laughed. A real sound, not the polished performance Lena had expected. I think we can arrange that. Come inside, your grandfather is very eager to meet you. The inside of the house was worse than the outside. All dark wood and expensive art, the kind of place where you were afraid to touch anything. But Mila seemed unfazed, her hand slipping from Lena's as she followed Francesca down a hallway hung with family portraits. Adrian caught Lena's arm before she could follow. My mother can be intense, but she won't hurt Mila. That's not how she operates. How does she operate? With words. Everything's a negotiation. Just don't let her back you into any corners. He paused. And don't believe everything she says. That wasn't reassuring. They found Mila in what looked like a library, standing in front of a massive desk where a man sat like a king, surveying his territory. He was older than Lena expected, probably pushing 70, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. The same gray as Adrian's, but harder, colder. This was the man she had heard talking about broken bones and disappeared rivals. This was the head of the Morello family. So, he said, not standing. This is my granddaughter. Mila, who'd been remarkably brave so far, suddenly looked very small. She took a step back, bumped into Francesca's legs, and Lena was across the room in seconds. Mila, come here. But Francesca's hand on Mila's shoulder stopped her. It's all right. Your grandfather can be a bit intimidating, but he's harmless. Aren't you, Vincent? Vincent Morello's mouth twitched. Harmless. That's a new one. But when he looked at Mila again, something in his expression shifted. You look like your grandmother did at that age. Same stubborn chin. My mama says my chin is perfect. Mila's voice was defiant, loyal in the way only children could be. Vincent actually smiled. Your mama is right. Come here, child. I have something for you. He pulled open a drawer and extracted a box. When he opened it, Lena caught the flash of something gold inside. A necklace. Delicate and clearly expensive. This belonged to your great-grandmother, Vincent said, and now it belongs to you. Mila's eyes went wide. Really? Really? He held it out, and after a moment's hesitation, Mila came forward to take it. You're a Morello now. That means something. Adrian's hand tightened on Lena's arm. A warning. She's a Voss, Lena said firmly. Her last name is Voss. The room went very quiet. Vincent's gaze lifted from Mila to Lena, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Is that so? That's so. Lena lifted her chin, refusing to back down even though every survival instinct she had was screaming at her to shut up. And she's 5 years old. Whatever this is, she gestured at the room, the house, the barely concealed power dynamics playing out. She doesn't need to be part of it yet. Lena, Adrian started, but Vincent held up a hand. No, let her speak. He leaned back in his chair, studying Lena with the kind of attention that made her skin crawl. You have opinions about my family, about how we operate. I'd like to hear them. It was a trap. Had to be. But Lena was too far in to back out now. I think, she said carefully, that Mila deserves a childhood. One where she's not treated like a pawn, or a legacy, or anything except a kid who likes cartoons and ice cream. Vincent's expression didn't change. And you think we can't give her that? I think you'll try. But I also think your world comes with strings attached. And I'm not ready to tie my daughter to them. The silence stretched out like a knife blade. Then, impossibly, Vincent laughed. She's got fire, he said to Adrian. I'll give you that. She's also right, Francesca said quietly, from where she stood with Mila. The child doesn't need to be burdened with family business. Not yet. Vincent waved a hand dismissively. Fine. The girl stays innocent. For now. He looked at Mila, who was examining the necklace with the kind of reverence only a 5-year-old could muster. But she's still my granddaughter. That doesn't change. Nobody's saying it does, Adrian said, and there was an edge to his voice Lena hadn't heard before. But Lena's her mother. What she says goes. Vincent's gaze sharpened on his son. Is that how this is going to work? That's how it has to work. Father and son stared at each other, and Lena felt the weight of years of unspoken conflict pressing down on the room. This wasn't just about Mila. This was something older, deeper. Finally, Vincent nodded. Very well, but the child will be protected. That's not negotiable. Agreed, Adrian said. And she'll be provided for. Education, healthcare, everything she needs. Agreed. And Vincent's eyes cut to Lena. Her mother will be taken care of as well. I assume you're handling that. I am. Good. Vincent stood, and the casual power in the gesture made Lena's stomach tighten. He was an old man, but he moved like someone who'd never been afraid a day in his life. Now, I believe Francesca mentioned cookies. The shift from tense confrontation to casual family gathering was so abrupt it gave Lena whiplash. But Mila seemed to take it in stride, following Francesca out of the library with the necklace clutched in one hand. Adrian waited until they were gone before speaking. That went better than I expected. Better? Lena's voice came out higher than she meant it to. He talked about her like she was a business acquisition. That's how he talks about everything, but he listened to you. That's significant. I'm thrilled. Adrian's mouth quirked into something that wasn't quite a smile. You stood up to him. Most people can't do that. Most people are probably smarter than me. Maybe. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, you were right. About the childhood thing, she deserves better than what I had. The admission caught her off guard. What did you have? Later. He held out a hand. Come on, let's make sure my mother's not filling her head with family mythology. They found Mila and Francesca in a kitchen that looked like something from a cooking show. All marble counters and professional-grade appliances. Mila was standing on a stool, helping to arrange cookies on a plate with the kind of concentration usually reserved for heart surgery. She's a natural, Francesca said, not looking up. Very precise. She gets that from her mother, Adrian said. Francesca glanced at Lena, and something passed between them. An assessment, maybe, or a challenge. You must have been very frightened, Francesca said quietly. 6 years ago. Lena went still. I remember the conversation you overheard. Francesca's voice was matter of fact. Vincent has many strengths, but volume control isn't one of them. And I remember saying things I shouldn't have. Things I regret. You said I was a liability. I said you were young and unprepared for this life, which was true. Francesca met her eyes directly. But I didn't mean you should disappear. I meant Adrian should have protected you better. Adrian's expression went tight. I didn't know she was listening. You should have assumed. Francesca turned back to the cookies. We forget sometimes that not everyone is raised in this world, that the things we say casually sound like threats to outsiders. She paused. I frightened you. I'm sorry. The apology was so unexpected that Lena didn't know how to respond. She'd spent 6 years building a version of Francesca Morello in her head, cold, calculating, dangerous. The woman in front of her seemed almost human. I protected my daughter, Lena said finally. That's what mothers do. Yes, they do. Francesca smiled, but there was sadness in it. And now you're afraid I'll take her from you. The thought crossed my mind. I won't, but I would like to know her, if you'll allow it. Lena looked at Mila, who was sneaking a cookie when she thought no one was watching. Her daughter. Her responsibility. And now, apparently part of this family, whether Lena liked it or not. Supervised visits, she heard herself say, until I'm comfortable. That's fair? Francesca extended a hand, and after a moment, Lena shook it. Thank you for giving her a life, even when it was hard. Thank you for keeping her safe. The words hit harder than they should have, because keeping Mila safe had been hard. Impossibly hard sometimes, when the bills piled up and the apartment got too cold and Lena worked doubles just to afford groceries. But she'd done it, alone. Mama, look! Mila held up a cookie shaped like a star. I made this one for you. It's beautiful, baby. They stayed for lunch, which turned into dinner because Mila was having too much fun to leave. Vincent disappeared into his office after the meal, but Francesca stayed, showing Mila a garden out back that had a koi pond and flowers Lena couldn't name. She's good with her, Adrian said from where he stood beside Lena on the terrace. They were watching through the windows as Francesca and Mila crouched by the pond, pointing at fish. Your mother's not what I expected. She's complicated. They both are. Adrian leaned against the railing. But they mean what they said about taking care of you, both of you. I don't need taking care of. Lena, he turned to face her. You've been living on poverty wages for 5 years, working yourself to exhaustion. Let us help. I don't want your money. It's not about money. It's about Mila having opportunities. Good schools, safe neighborhoods, a future that isn't limited by how many shifts you can pick up. He was right, and she hated it. Hated that he could swoop in and offer solutions to problems she'd been breaking herself against for years. I want to keep working, she said. Not at Aurelio's, maybe, but something. I can't just sit around in your penthouse playing house. So don't. Find something you actually want to do. Go back to school. Start a business. Whatever. His voice softened. You get to choose now. That's the point. And what do you get out of this? I get to know my daughter. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. That's all I want. They were interrupted by Mila running inside, breathless with excitement. Mama, Grandma Francesca says I can come back next week and feed the fish. Can I please? Lena looked at Adrian, who shrugged, then at Francesca, who was standing in the doorway with a knowing smile. We'll see, she said, which was parent code for yes, and Mila knew it. She shrieked with delight and ran back outside to examine the koi pond more closely. You're going to spoil her, Lena said to Francesca. That's what grandmothers are for. The drive back to the city was quiet. Mila fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the day, and Lena watched the suburbs give way to taller buildings and brighter lights. Adrian was quiet beside her, lost in his own thoughts. Your father? Lena said eventually. He's going to push. About Mila's last name, about her place in the family. You know that, right? I know. And? And I'll handle it. He glanced at her. But he's not entirely wrong. She should know where she comes from. All of it. The good and the bad. She's 5. I'm not talking about now, but eventually she'll have questions. And when she does, we need to be ready with answers. The we settled over Lena like a blanket she wasn't sure she wanted. A week ago, it had been just her and Mila against the world. Now there was Adrian, his parents, his whole family with their expectations and their power and their complicated history. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of what? That I'll lose her, not physically, but that your world will swallow her up and she'll become someone I don't recognize. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I'm scared of that too, but for different reasons. What do you mean? I'm scared I'll screw this up. He stared out the window. I don't know how to be a father. My own wasn't exactly a model of parenting excellence, and I keep thinking about all the ways I could damage her without even meaning to. The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This was a side of Adrian she'd never seen, uncertain, questioning, human in ways that had nothing to do with power or control. You're already doing better than you think, she said. How do you figure? You're worried about it. That means you care. She paused. Bad parents don't worry they're bad parents. Adrian huffed something that might have been a laugh. That's a low bar. Maybe, but it's a start. They pulled up to his building, and Adrian carried Mila inside while Lena gathered the bag of things Francesca had insisted they take home. More clothes for Mila, toys, books. the necklace carefully wrapped in tissue paper. Once Mila was tucked into bed, still wearing the dress because she'd refused to take it off, Lena found Adrian in the kitchen pouring whiskey into 2 glasses. "You said we'd talk," she said, "about your business, about what you actually do." Adrian slid one of the glasses toward her. "You sure you want to know?" "No, but I need to." He took a long drink before speaking. "My family runs a construction business. Legitimate on paper. We build things. Infrastructure, commercial buildings, residential developments. And off paper? Off paper, we control most of the labor unions in the city, which means we control who works, who doesn't, who gets contracts, who gets shut out." He met her eyes. "It's not drugs or trafficking or any of the things you're probably imagining. It's just leverage, power, making sure the right people owe us favors." "That's it?" "Mostly." Adrian's jaw tightened. "There's collection work, debt enforcement. Sometimes people need to be persuaded to honor their agreements. But it's not. We're not the mob you see in movies. We don't execute people in the street." "But you hurt them." He didn't deny it. "When necessary." Lena took a drink. The whiskey burned going down. "Have you? Hurt people?" "Yes." "Recently?" "Define recently." "In the last year." Adrian was quiet. "Twice, both times because they threatened my family. And both times they lived." The casual way he said it made her stomach turn. This was the reality of his world. Violence as business strategy. Brutality as a management tool. "Does that change things?" Adrian asked, "knowing what I do?" "I don't know." Lena set down her glass. "Part of me wants to grab Mila and run, but the practical part knows that wouldn't work. You'd find us, and then we'd be right back here, except with less trust. So where does that leave us?" "I don't know that either." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the boy she'd fallen for 6 years ago buried somewhere under the hard edges. "But I think we have to try. For her sake." "Just for her sake?" The question hung in the air between them. Lena thought about the way her heart still jumped when he got too close, about the flutter in her chest when he smiled at Mila, about the dangerous, stupid part of her that wondered what it would be like to let herself feel something again. "I don't know," she said honestly. Adrian moved around the counter, and suddenly he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the silver starting to thread through his hair at the temples. "I never stopped thinking about you, even after I thought you were gone." "Adrian, I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that." His hand came up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, careful, nothing like the controlled violence he'd just admitted to. "Whatever happens with us, we figure out how to be parents first. Everything else comes after." "Everything else?" "The part where I'm still in love with you." The confession hit her like a physical blow. Lena took a step back, putting space between them because she needed air and distance and time to process what he'd just said. "You don't love me," she said. "You love the person I was 6 years ago." "Maybe. Or maybe I love the person who fought my entire family to protect our daughter. Who stood up to my father like he was nobody. Who's been surviving on nothing and somehow raising an amazing kid." He paused. "That person seems pretty lovable to me." Lena's throat felt tight. "This is a bad idea." "Probably. We have too much history, too much hurt." "Definitely. And I don't trust you." "I know." Adrian's voice was soft. "But maybe we can work on that." Before she could respond, a cry came from the bedroom. Mila, having a nightmare. They both moved at the same time, Adrian reaching the door first. But Lena was the one Mila reached for when she bolted upright in bed. "Mama," she sobbed, "I dreamed you left." "I'm right here, baby, not going anywhere." Lena held her tight, feeling Mila's heart hammering against her chest. "Just a bad dream." "Promise?" "Promise." Adrian stood in the doorway, watching them with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. When Mila finally calmed down enough to lie back, he approached the bed carefully. "Can I sit?" he asked. Mila nodded, and Adrian perched on the edge of the mattress, big and slightly awkward in the space meant for a child. "When I was little," he said, "I used to have bad dreams too. Want to know what my dad told me?" Mila nodded again, eyes wide. He said dreams are just your brain sorting through the day, taking all the big feelings and filing them away so your head doesn't explode. Adrian's mouth quirked. He wasn't great at the comforting part, but the information was solid. My head's not going to explode? Not even a little bit. Mila considered this. Your dad sounds weird. Adrian laughed, a real sound, surprised and genuine. He really is. But I like the cookies at his house. Those were good cookies. Lena watched them, father and daughter, and felt something in her chest crack open. This was what she'd denied him, these moments, these small connections, 5 years of them. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Adrian looked up, confused. For what? For taking this from you. She gestured at Mila, who was already starting to drift off again. You should have had all of this. From the beginning. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved around the bed until he was standing next to her. Yeah, he said simply. I should have. But we can't change that. We can only move forward. How? Day by day, figuring it out as we go. He looked down at Mila, now fully asleep again. Together. The word hung in the air like a promise, or maybe a threat. Lena wasn't sure which, but as they left the bedroom, pulling the door shut behind them, she realized it didn't matter. They were in this now, all 3 of them, and there was no going back. 3 days into their fragile arrangement, Mila woke up burning with fever. Lena felt it the second she touched her daughter's forehead, the kind of heat that sent panic shooting through every maternal instinct she possessed. She was checking Mila's temperature with the back of her hand when Adrian appeared in the doorway, already dressed for whatever business he conducted at 6 in the morning. Something's wrong, Lena said, and her voice came out thin. Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides. One look at Mila, flushed, whimpering, curled into a ball under the expensive sheets, and his expression went hard. How high? I don't know. I don't have a thermometer. The admission felt like failure. What kind of mother didn't have a thermometer? There's one in the bathroom, medicine cabinet. Adrian was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling my doctor. It's 6 in the morning. He's on retainer. That's what retainer means. He was scrolling through contacts, not looking at her. Get the thermometer. Lena found it. Digital, expensive, probably more accurate than anything she could have afforded. And by the time she got back, Adrian was speaking in low clip tones to someone on the other end of the line. 5 years old, fever, malaise. No, I don't know how high yet. He paused. Fine, 20 minutes. He hung up as Lena got the reading. 103.2. Adrian's jaw tightened. Doctor, Castellano's coming here. He'll be 20 minutes. We should take her to the hospital. No hospitals. The words came out sharp. Too many questions, too much exposure. Castellano's good, better than good. He'll take care of her. Lena wanted to argue, but Mila chose that moment to open her eyes. Mama, I don't feel good. I know, baby. The doctor's coming, okay? He's going to make you feel better. I want my elephant. Mila's voice was small, scared in a way that made Lena's chest ache. The one from yesterday? Where did you leave it? Living room, on the couch. Adrian was already moving. I'll get it. He returned with the stuffed elephant and something else, a damp washcloth that he'd apparently thought to grab from the kitchen. He pressed it gently to Mila's forehead, and the gesture was so unexpectedly tender that Lena felt something shift in her chest. There you go, he said softly. That should help a little. Mila's eyes focused on him with the kind of trust that only children could muster. Are you my dad? The question landed like a bomb in the quiet room. Adrian went very still, the washcloth frozen against Mila's forehead. His eyes cut to Lena, silent question written all over his face. This was the conversation Lena had been dreading, the one she'd known was coming but had hoped to control, to manage, to ease into gently when the time was right. Not like this. Not when Mila was sick and scared and looking for comfort. Yes, Lena heard herself say. He is. Mila's brow furrowed. But you said my dad was gone. I said he was away. That's different than gone. Why was he away? Adrian's voice was rough when he answered. Because I didn't know you existed, but I do now, and I'm not going anywhere. Mila processed this with the gravity only a sick 5-year-old could manage. Okay, can you stay until the doctor comes? Yeah. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. I can do that. Dr. Castellano arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a black bag that looked like it belonged in a different century. He examined Mila with efficient gentleness, while Lena hovered and Adrian stood rigid by the window, radiating tension. Looks like flu, Castellano said finally. The good news is she's young and strong. The bad news is it's going to get worse before it gets better. High fever, body aches, probably some vomiting. What do we do? Lena asked. Fluids, rest, children's acetaminophen for the fever. I'll prescribe an antiviral, should help shorten the duration. He pulled out a prescription pad, scribbled something. And someone needs to stay with her. Monitor her temperature. If it hits 105 or she starts having trouble breathing, you call me immediately. I'll stay, Lena and Adrian said simultaneously. They looked at each other. Castellano cleared his throat diplomatically. Both of you staying would be ideal. Illness like this, the child needs comfort and care around the clock. After he left, with promises to check in later and instructions to call any time, Lena found herself in the strange position of being quarantined in luxury with a man she'd spent 6 years avoiding and a daughter who'd just learned the truth about her father. I'll clear my schedule, Adrian said. He was already texting someone, probably rearranging whatever shady business deals he'd had planned. Whatever needs to happen can wait. You don't have to eat. Yes, I do. He looked up from his phone. She's my daughter, and she's sick. Nothing else matters. The conviction in his voice left no room for argument, so Lena didn't try. The next 12 hours were a blur of temperature checks and medicine doses, and Mila alternating between fitful sleep and fevered wakefulness. Adrian proved surprisingly competent, changing washcloths, bringing water, reading stories in a low voice that seemed to soothe Mila even when the words didn't make sense through the fever haze. Somewhere around midnight, when Mila finally fell into deeper sleep, Lena found herself sitting on the couch with Adrian, both of them exhausted. You're good at this, she said quietly. At what? The dad thing. Adrian let out a breath that might have been a laugh. I'm faking it, just doing what seems right, and hoping I don't screw up. That's what all parents do. Even you? Especially me. Lena leaned back, closing her eyes. I had no idea what I was doing when she was born. Still don't most days. But you figure it out because you have to. Were you scared when you had her? The question pulled at something Lena had tried not to think about for 5 years. Terrified. I was alone in a county hospital. No family. No support. Just me and this tiny person who depended on me for everything. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I should have been there. I didn't give you the chance. You thought you were protecting her. I was protecting her. Lena opened her eyes, looked at him. Your mother talked about liabilities and complications. Your father talked about rivals and revenge. I heard all of that and thought, what kind of life am I bringing a baby into? A complicated one, Adrian said, but not a bad one. How do you figure? Because she would have had me, and I would have done anything to keep her safe. Both of you. His voice dropped. I still will. The weight of that promise hung in the air between them. Lena wanted to believe it, wanted to trust that he meant it, but trust was earned, not given, and Adrian had 5 years of absence to overcome. She called you Dad, Lena said, earlier, when she asked if you'd stay. I noticed. How does that feel? Adrian's expression was complicated, like I won something I didn't deserve, and like I'm terrified I'll lose it. You won't lose her. You can't promise that. Neither can you. That's the hell of parenting. Lena stood, stretched muscles that had been tensed for hours. But we try anyway, because the alternative is worse. She checked on Mila, still sleeping, fever down slightly, and when she came back, Adrian had moved to the windows. The city stretched out below them, a million lights representing a million lives that didn't include theirs. I need to tell you something, he said without turning around. The tone made her stomach drop. What? The reason I said no hospitals, it's not just about exposure. He turned to face her. There's a situation developing, rival family making moves. And if they know about Mila, if they can connect her to me, they'll use her. Lena's blood turned to ice. This is exactly what I was afraid of. which is why I have people watching. Security on the building, surveillance on your old apartment, eyes on anyone who might pose a threat. His voice was calm, controlled. Nothing's going to happen to either of you. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can make it extremely expensive for anyone who tries. The clinical way he said it made Lena's skin crawl. This was his world. Threat assessment and countermeasures, violence as deterrent. And now Mila was part of it. What family? She asked. The Russos. They've been pushing into our territory for months. Small stuff at first, but it's escalating. Adrian moved back to the couch, sat down like the conversation was exhausting him. My father wants to hit back hard. I'm trying to find a different solution. Like what? Negotiation, compromise, things that don't end with bodies in the river. He looked at her. I'm not my father, Lena. I don't want that life for Mila. But right now, I'm caught between what he expects and what I know is right. The vulnerability in his admission caught her off guard. What does your father expect? Blood. Always blood. He thinks it's the only language people understand. Adrian's jaw tightened. And maybe he's right. But I keep thinking, what kind of man do I want Mila to see when she looks at me? Someone who solves problems with violence? Or someone who finds another way? She's 5. She doesn't need to see either. She's smart. She'll figure it out eventually. He met Lena's eyes. And when she does, I want her to be proud of me, not afraid. The raw honesty in his voice made something in Lena's chest ache. This was the boy she'd fallen for, the one who questioned everything, who wanted to be better than his circumstances. She'd thought that part of him had died, crushed under the weight of family expectations. Maybe she'd been wrong. Talk to them, she said. The Russos. See if there's a deal to be made. My father will see it as weakness. Your father isn't making this decision. You are. Lena moved closer. You said you want to be better. This is how you start. Adrian studied her face like he was looking for something. You really believe that? I believe you have a choice. We all do. She paused. I chose to run. You can choose something different. Before he could respond, a sound came from the bedroom. Mila, calling out in her sleep. They both moved at once, but it was Adrian who got there first, settling on the edge of the bed and checking her temperature with practiced efficiency now. Still elevated, he said quietly, but better than before. Mila's eyes fluttered open. Dad? The word hit him visibly. His whole body went rigid, like he'd been struck. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm here. I had a dream you left. Her voice was small, echoing what she'd said that first night. Not leaving, promise. Adrian brushed hair from her forehead. How are you feeling? Bad. Everything hurts. I know, but you're doing great, being really brave. Mama says brave people can still be scared. Adrian glanced at Lena, standing in the doorway. Your mama's smart. Are you scared? Mila asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. Sometimes. Yeah. Of what? Of messing this up. His voice was barely above a whisper. Of not being good enough. Mila considered this with the seriousness only sick children could muster. Mama says nobody's good enough. You just have to try your best. Your mama's really smart. I know. Mila's eyes were already closing again. Can you read me the mouse story? Adrian looked helpless. Lena came over, handed him the book from the nightstand. Third story in, about the cheese moon. She watched him read, halting at first, then finding a rhythm, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This was what she'd denied him, not just the big moments, but these small intimacies, the bedtime stories, the fever checks, the quiet comfort of just being there. When Mila drifted off again, Adrian closed the book carefully. She called me Dad, he said, still looking at Mila's sleeping face. I heard. I don't know how to be what she needs. None of us do. We just show up and hope it's enough. Lena sat on the other side of the bed. But you're here. That counts for something. Does it count for you? The question hung between them. Lena thought about the past week, Adrian stepping up, showing up, trying despite having no roadmap. She thought about him reading stories and checking temperatures and promising not to leave. "It's a start," she said finally. They took turns sleeping in shifts, one of them always awake to monitor Mila. By morning, her fever had broken, leaving her weak but coherent. She demanded breakfast, a good sign according to Dr. Castellano when he called to check in, and proceeded to eat scrambled eggs while interrogating Adrian about everything he'd missed in her life. "What's my favorite color?" "Pink?" Adrian guessed. "Purple." "Try again." "What's my favorite animal?" "Elephant, that one I know." Mila looked pleased. "What about my favorite food?" "Chocolate?" "Close. Chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs." Adrian made a note in his phone. Lena watched from the kitchen, coffee in hand, as her daughter systematically downloaded 5 years of information to a father trying desperately to catch up. "What's my middle name?" Adrian looked stumped. He glanced at Lena. "Rose," she supplied. "After my grandmother." "Mila Rose Voss," he said, testing it out. Then carefully, "How do you feel about Morello?" The room went quiet. Mila looked confused. Lena felt her spine straighten. "What?" "Not replacing Voss, just adding." Adrian's voice was measured, diplomatic. "Mila Rose Voss Morello. So she has both." "We talked about this," Lena said tightly. "She's a Voss. She's also a Morello. That's not negotiable." His voice hardened. "She's my daughter. She deserves to carry my name. She deserves to not be a target. She's already a target the second anyone connects her to me. The name doesn't change that." Adrian stood, moved away from the table. "But it gives her protection. My family's protection. That matters." "I don't want her to be part of this. She already is." The words came out louder than he probably meant them to. Mila flinched, and Adrian immediately softened. "Sorry. I'm sorry, sweetheart." But Mila was looking between them with wide eyes. "Are you fighting about me?" "No," they both said simultaneously. "Yes," Mila countered. "You are. About my name." Lena opened her mouth, but Mila kept talking. "I like my name. Mila Rose Voss, but..." She looked at Adrian. "If you're my dad, shouldn't I have your name too? That's how it works, right?" "It's complicated," Lena started. "Everything's complicated," Mila said, with the exasperation of someone who'd heard that phrase too many times. "But I want it, the Morello part." Adrian's expression was carefully neutral, but Lena saw the flash of triumph in his eyes. He'd won, and they both knew it. Because arguing against Mila's wishes made Lena the bad guy, and that was a position she couldn't afford. "Fine," she said tightly, "but it goes last, Voss Morello, in that order." "Deal." Adrian extended a hand, formal and ridiculous. "Thank you." Lena didn't shake it. Instead, she grabbed her coffee and walked onto the balcony, needing air and space and distance from the feeling that she was losing control of everything. She heard the door slide open behind her. Adrian, of course. "That was manipulative," she said without turning around. "That was me wanting my daughter to have my name. There's a difference." "Is there?" Lena spun to face him. "Because it felt like you backed me into a corner and used her to do it. I asked. She answered." His voice was level, but there was steel underneath. "You can't expect me to just accept being written out of her life on paper because you're scared." "I'm not scared, I'm practical." "You're terrified." Adrian moved closer. "You've spent 6 years building walls around her, and now someone's asking you to take a few of them down. That's terrifying, but it's also necessary," says the man who gets everything he wants. "I don't have everything I want." The words came out quiet, intense. "I have a daughter who doesn't know me, a woman who looks at me like I'm a threat, and a family business that's one wrong move away from a war. So no, Lena, I don't have everything." The honesty in his voice cut through her anger. She looked at him, really looked, and saw exhaustion written in every line of his face. The last 36 hours had worn on him too. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "About the name thing. You're right. She deserves to have both." Adrian nodded, accepting the apology without gloating. "And for what it's worth, I get why you're scared. But I meant what I said. Nothing's going to happen to either of you." "You can't promise that?" "Watch me." The absolute conviction in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, It made her wonder what he was willing to do to keep that promise, how far he'd go, how much blood he'd spill. They went back inside to find Mila had moved to the couch, wrapped in a blanket and watching her mouse cartoon. She looked up when they entered, studying their faces with that uncanny perception kids had. "Are you done fighting?" "We weren't fighting," Adrian said. "We were discussing." "Looked like fighting." Sometimes adults discuss things loudly. Mila didn't look convinced, but she let it go. "Can I have juice?" Adrian moved to the kitchen. Lena sat next to her daughter, feeling the warmth of her small body through the blanket. Still slightly feverish, but better. Getting better. "I'm sorry if we scared you," Lena said quietly. "You didn't, but I don't like when you're mad at each other." Mila leaned into her side. "It's weird." "What's weird?" "Having a dad, it's good weird, but still weird." She paused. "Is he going to stay?" "Yeah, baby, he's going to stay." "Good." Mila sounded satisfied. "I like him." Lena's throat felt tight. "Yeah?" "Yeah. He's nice, and he reads good." Mila tilted her head up. "Do you like him?" The question caught Lena off guard. "It's complicated." "Everything's complicated," Mila repeated, and Lena had to bite back a laugh. "Yeah, it really is." Adrian returned with juice in a sippy cup. Another thing that had materialized from nowhere, along with child-safe utensils and age-appropriate dishes. Someone, probably Francesca, had thought of everything. "Here you go." He handed it over. "Small sips, okay? Don't want you getting sick again." Mila nodded seriously, taking her medicine instructions like a doctor's orders. Then she patted the couch next to her. "Sit. This is the good part." Adrian sat, and within minutes Mila had repositioned herself so she was leaning against him, using his arm like a pillow. The gesture was casual, natural, like she'd been doing it her whole life. Lena watched Adrian's face cycle through about 6 different emotions: surprise, pleasure, uncertainty, and something that looked dangerously close to love. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to meet. Tomorrow, noon, neutral ground. Come alone. M." Russolina's blood ran cold. She glanced at Adrian, who was absorbed in explaining the plot of the mouse cartoon to Mila, with the gravity usually reserved for Shakespeare. He hadn't seen the message. But someone had her number, someone from the family he'd been talking about, and they wanted to meet. She should tell him, should show him the text and let him handle it. But something in her, the part that had survived 6 years alone, that had learned to rely on herself, wanted to know what they wanted first. Against every instinct she'd developed, Lena texted back. "Where?" The response came immediately. "Grant Park. By the fountain. Don't tell Adrian. This is just business. Just business." Like that meant anything in their world. Lena deleted the messages and pocketed her phone, trying to ignore the way her hands shook. She'd spent 6 years keeping Mila safe from this world. Now it was reaching out, making contact, pulling her in whether she wanted it or not. Adrian looked over at her, and something in her expression must have given her away because his eyes narrowed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just tired." He didn't look convinced, but Mila chose that moment to announce she was hungry again, and the conversation shifted to food and medicine schedules, and whether chicken soup actually helped, or if that was just something people said. But later, after Mila was asleep, and Adrian had retreated to his office to make calls about the situation with the Russos, Lena stood at those enormous windows and thought about tomorrow. About meeting a stranger who'd somehow gotten her number. About walking into something she didn't understand. And about whether she was making the smartest decision of her life or the stupidest. Lena left the penthouse at 11:30, telling Adrian she needed to pick up some things from a pharmacy. He'd looked at her strangely. They had everything Mila could possibly need already. But he was on a conference call and just nodded, distracted. Gianna had come over to sit with Mila, who was still recovering but demanding more activities than one sick child should reasonably want. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. Grant Park was crowded even on a Tuesday. Tourists taking photos, joggers circling the paths, people eating lunch on benches. Lena made her way to the fountain, scanning faces and trying not to look as nervous as she felt. She'd dressed carefully, jeans and a jacket, nothing that screamed money or connection to the Morello family. Just another person in the park. She saw him before he approached. Mid-40s, expensive suit that somehow looked casual, dark hair graying at the temples. He had the same controlled presence Adrian did, the kind that came from years of people doing what you said without question. Miss Voss, he didn't offer a hand. Thank you for coming. I don't know who you are. Marco Russo. He gestured to a nearby bench. Shall we sit? This won't take long. Lena's instinct screamed at her to run, but she'd come this far. She sat. Marco settled beside her, close enough to talk without being overheard, but not so close as to crowd. Professional distance. I'll be direct. Adrian Morello has something that belongs to me, or rather something he's preventing me from accessing. Construction contracts in the South Side. 3 development projects that should have been mine. I don't know anything about construction contracts. Of course you don't, but you know Adrian, and more importantly, he cares about you. Marco's voice was pleasant, conversational, which makes you valuable. Lena's blood turned to ice. If you're threatening me, I'm not threatening anyone. I'm offering you a business opportunity. He pulled out a phone, showed her a photo. 3 men she didn't recognize standing in front of a construction site. These are my partners, good people, family men. They have contracts that are being blocked by Vincent Morello's influence. All I need is information. What kind of information? When Adrian meets with the union reps, who he's paying off, documentation of bribery, if you can get it. Marco pocketed the phone. Nothing that would hurt him directly, just enough to level the playing field. You want me to spy on him? I want you to help honest businessmen get a fair shake. Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. And in return, I'll make sure you and your daughter stay safe. Because, let's be honest, Ms. Voss, you're in a dangerous position. Adrian's enemies will eventually figure out that little girl exists. When they do, she becomes a target. Adrian's protecting us. Adrian's one man. I have an organization, networks, resources. He leaned back, all casual confidence. Work with me, and I guarantee your safety, both of you. Hell, I'll set you up somewhere quiet. New identity, new life. You could disappear the way you wanted to 6 years ago. The offer hung in the air like poison. Lena's mind raced. This was a trap. Had to be. But Marco knew about Mila, knew she'd tried to disappear before. He'd done his homework. How did you get my number? I have people everywhere. The restaurant where you worked, the building where you live now. It's not hard when you know where to look. Marco stood. You don't have to decide today. Take some time. Think about what's best for your daughter, but don't take too long. This situation with the Morellos is escalating. When it goes bad, and it will go bad, you want to be on the right side. He walked away before Lena could respond, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never been there. She sat on that bench for another 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had just asked her to betray Adrian, to spy on him, gather information, help his enemies. And the worst part was, she'd actually considered it. For about 3 seconds, the offer of safety and escape had been tempting enough that she'd hesitated. That hesitation felt like betrayal all on its own. When she got back to the penthouse, Gianna was reading to Mila from what looked like an Italian children's book, translating as she went. Mila was absorbed, asking questions about words and meanings. She barely looked up when Lena entered. How was the pharmacy? Gianna asked with a knowing smile. Fine. Got everything I needed. It wasn't until Gianna left that Adrian emerged from his office, phone still in hand, but the call apparently finished. He looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting battles on multiple fronts. Everything okay? He asked. This was the moment. Lena could tell him about Marco, about the meeting, about the offer. Let him handle it the way he handled everything, with control and strategy and probably violence. Or she could keep it to herself. Figure out what Marco really wanted, what game was being played, without dragging Adrian deeper into conflict. Everything's fine, she heard herself say. Just needed some air. Adrian studied her face like he was reading a contract for loopholes. You sure? Positive. She moved past him to check on Mila, who was now attempting to teach herself Italian from the book Gianna had left behind. How's she doing? Better. Fever's completely gone. Castellano called. Said she should be back to normal in a day or two. Adrian followed her into the living room. We need to talk. Those 4 words never meant anything good. Lena braced herself. About what? About where we go from here. Living arrangements, custody, all of it. He sat down, gestured for her to do the same. I meant what I said about getting you your own place in the building, but I've been thinking maybe that's not the best solution. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we should try something different. All three of us under one roof, at least for a while. He held up a hand before she could protest. Not like that. Separate rooms, clear boundaries. But Mila's getting attached. She's calling me dad now, and I don't want her growing up thinking we can't stand to be in the same space. Lena opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Because he wasn't wrong. Mila had been more settled these past few days than Lena had seen her in months. The nightmares had stopped. She was eating better, sleeping better, laughing more. And a lot of that had to do with Adrian being present. For how long? I don't know. A month? See how it goes? Adrian's voice was careful, like he was negotiating a hostage situation. If it doesn't work, we figure out something else. But I think we owe it to her to try. A month. A month. And if you hate it, if it's too much, we revisit the separate apartment idea. Lena looked at Mila, who'd abandoned the Italian book in favor of building something elaborate with blocks. Her daughter. Her responsibility. And increasingly, someone who needed both of them. Okay, she said finally. 1 month, but I need some things. Name them. I need space. Physical space. My own room, my own bathroom, somewhere I can go when I need to be alone. She paused. And I need you to be honest with me. About your business, about threats, about everything. No secrets. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's not always possible. Then this won't work. They stared at each other in that expensive living room, and Lena saw the exact moment he made his choice. Saw him weighing what he was willing to sacrifice for the chance at something resembling a family. Fine, he said. But there are things I can't tell you. Not because I don't want to, but because knowing them would put you at risk. Can you live with that? It wasn't what she wanted, but it was probably the best she'd get. I can try. Then we have a deal. Adrian extended his hand, formal and slightly ridiculous for the second time that day. This time, Lena shook it. His grip was warm, solid, and held on just a fraction longer than necessary. When their eyes met, something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe, or the beginning of trust, or just exhaustion from two people trying to do right by a child they'd made together in what felt like another lifetime. Mama, Mila called out, come see what I built. The moment broke. Lena pulled her hand back and went to examine her daughter's creation, which appeared to be a castle with structural integrity issues. Adrian followed, offering engineering advice that Mila mostly ignored in favor of her own chaotic vision. This was their life now, all three of them, figuring it out as they went. That night, after Mila was asleep and Adrian had disappeared into his office again, Lena stood on the balcony and tried not to think about Marco Russo's offer. The way he'd known exactly what to say to make her doubt, to make her wonder if she was making the right choices. Her phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. Tick-tock. Clock's running. You have 3 days to decide. Lena deleted it immediately, but the message burned in her mind. 3 days. And then what? What would Marco do if she said no? Would he make good on the implied threats? Come after Mila? Or was this whole thing a test? Adrian's family checking to see if she could be trusted, if she'd sell out when pressure was applied. The door to the balcony slid open. Adrian carrying 2 glasses of wine. Thought you might need this, he said, offering one. Lena took it gratefully. Thanks. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the city. Finally, Adrian spoke. Something's bothering you, has been since you got back from the pharmacy. It's nothing. Lena. His voice was gentle but firm. We just agreed to try this. That means being honest with each other. She could feel the lie sitting heavy on her tongue, the easy out, the simple deflection. But she thought about Mila, about the month they were about to spend trying to be something resembling a family. And she thought about how that started. With truth, even when it was hard. Someone contacted me, she said quietly. Marco Russo. Adrian went completely still. When? This morning. That's where I really went, not the pharmacy. The silence that followed was dangerous. Lena could feel Adrian's control slipping, could see his jaw working as he processed what she'd just told him. What did he want? Information about your business dealings, in exchange for protection. She made herself look at him. I didn't agree to anything. I'm telling you now. What did you tell him? That I needed time to think. Adrian's hand tightened on his wine glass. For a second, she thought he might throw it off the balcony. Instead, he set it down carefully on the railing. Did he threaten you? Not directly, but he made it clear that Mila's existence isn't as secret as we'd like it to be. Son of a bitch. Adrian pulled out his phone, started typing furiously. I'm having security doubled. No one gets within 100 feet of you or Mila without clearance. Adrian, this is exactly what I was afraid of. They're going after you because they know you're my weak point. He was pacing now, all controlled energy and barely contained fury. I should have seen this coming. Should have had better protection in place. Stop! Lena grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. This isn't your fault. And I'm not your weak point. I'm a person who made a choice to tell you the truth. Don't make me regret it. Some of the tension bled out of his shoulders. You should have told me immediately. Probably. But I wanted to figure out what I thought first. What I wanted to do. And what do you want to do? Lena took a breath. I want to tell him no, but I want to understand what we're walking into first. What this conflict with his family really means. Because if Mila's at risk, I need to know how serious it is. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, controlled. It's serious. The Russos have been pushing into our territory for 18 months. Small encroachments at first, but they're getting bolder. My father wants to push back. Hard. I've been trying to negotiate a settlement, divide territory fairly, but they're not interested in fair. Why not? Because they smell blood. They think we're weak, that the next generation, meaning me, doesn't have the stomach for real conflict. His mouth twisted. They're not entirely wrong. What does that mean? It means I don't want to be the person my father was, the one who solved every problem with violence. But the alternative is letting them take everything we've built. And I can't do that either. Lena heard the conflict in his voice, the impossible choice he was trying to navigate. What if there's a third option? Like what? Like actually talking to them, not through intermediaries or threats, just two people having a conversation about how to coexist. She could see him about to protest. I know it sounds naive, but Marco approached me for a reason. He wants something. Maybe we can give him something without it costing everything. You want me to negotiate with the man who just tried to turn you into a spy? I want you to try something that isn't violence. Lena met his eyes. For Mila, show her there's another way. Adrian looked at her like she was suggesting he jump off the balcony. That's not how this world works. Then maybe it should work differently. They stood there in the Chicago night air, the city humming below them, and Lena saw something shift in Adrian's expression. Not agreement exactly, but consideration, like maybe, just maybe, there was a path he hadn't seen before. I'll think about it, he said finally, but in the meantime, you stay away from Marco Russo. If he contacts you again, you tell me immediately. Agreed. And we get you trained. Trained in what? Self-defense, threat recognition, basic security protocols. Adrian's voice was firm. If you're going to be part of this family, even temporarily, you need to know how to protect yourself. The idea of Lena learning to fight was almost laughable, but she thought about Mila, about keeping her safe, and nodded. Okay, I'll set it up. My guy's good, former military. He'll teach you what you need to know. They went back inside, and the rest of the evening passed in something approaching normalcy. Adrian worked in his office. Lena read a book she'd been trying to finish for 3 months. Mila slept peacefully in the next room, fever gone, and color back in her cheeks. But underneath the surface, everything had shifted. Marco Russo knew about them. He'd made his move. And now they were all playing a game where the rules kept changing and the stakes couldn't get higher. The next morning brought Adrian's self-defense instructor, a man named Carter who looked like he could bench press a car and spoke in terse, efficient sentences. He showed up at 8, surveyed the living room, and promptly moved furniture to create a training space. We'll start with awareness, he said to Lena. Most self-defense is about seeing problems before they become problems. For the next 2 hours, while Adrian worked and Mila colored at the kitchen table, Carter taught Lena how to read body language, identify threats, and create exit strategies. It was exhausting and humbling. She'd thought she was aware of her surroundings after 6 years of careful living, but Carter showed her a dozen things she'd been missing. "You're distracted," he said during a break. "Present, but not focused. What's on your mind?" "Besides the obvious?" "Besides that." Lena glanced at Adrian, who was on another call in his office, door closed. "I'm trying to figure out if I'm making the right choice. Staying here, letting Mila get attached, all of it." Carter followed her gaze. "He's different with you two here, softer. I've worked with the Morellos for 8 years, and I've never seen him like this." "Like what?" "Like he has something to lose." Carter's expression was unreadable. "That makes him more dangerous, but also more careful." The observation settled over Lena like a weight. She'd been so focused on protecting Mila from Adrian's world that she hadn't considered how Mila's existence might be changing that world, making it safer somehow by giving Adrian a reason to be better, or making everything more dangerous by giving his enemies a target. They resumed training. Carter showed her how to break a grip, create distance, use her environment as a weapon. By the time he left, Lena's muscles were screaming and her head was full of scenarios she'd never wanted to consider. "You're a natural," Carter said at the door. "Most people take weeks to get comfortable with this stuff. You picked it up in hours." "Years of waitressing," Lena said. "You learn to move in tight spaces and avoid grabby drunks." Carter almost smiled. "Same principle, different application." After he left, Lena found Adrian watching her from the kitchen. "How was it?" "Harder than I expected, more useful than I wanted to admit." She grabbed water from the fridge. "When do I go again?" "Tomorrow. If you're up for it." "I'm up for it." That afternoon, Francesca appeared with bags of groceries and the determination to teach Mila how to make fresh pasta. Adrian looked alarmed. Flour and a 5-year-old seemed like a recipe for disaster, but Francesca waved off his concerns. "Children should know where their food comes from," she said, already setting up a workstation on the kitchen island. "Besides, Mila and I need to bond. Don't we, sweetheart?" Mila nodded enthusiastically. She'd been bored recovering from her illness, and the promise of getting her hands dirty was clearly appealing. Lena watched her daughter knead dough under Francesca's patient instruction, flour dusting both their faces, and felt something in her chest unclench. This was what she'd wanted for Mila: family, connection, people who cared. She'd just never imagined it would come with this particular package. "She's good with her," Adrian said quietly from beside her. "Yeah, she is. My mother wasn't always like this. When I was growing up, she was harder, more focused on the business, on maintaining appearances." He paused. "I think she has regrets about how she raised us. This is her chance to do it differently." "Is that what this is for you too? A chance to do it differently?" Adrian looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "Every day. Every single day I wake up and think about how I don't want to be my father, how I want Mila to see me and feel safe, not afraid." His voice dropped. "And every day I'm terrified I'm going to fail." The honesty hit Lena hard. She'd been so focused on her own fears that she hadn't fully considered Adrian's. The weight of expectations, the pull of family legacy, the impossible balance between the world he'd inherited and the man he wanted to be. "You're not going to fail," she said. "You can't know that." "No, but I can choose to believe it." She touched his arm. "And so can you." Before Adrian could respond, Mila shrieked with delight as the pasta dough formed into something resembling fettuccine. Francesca was laughing, her careful composure abandoned in favor of genuine joy, and the moment was so perfectly normal that Lena wanted to capture it somehow. Freeze it in time before everything got complicated again. But time didn't work like that. The afternoon became evening. They ate the pasta Mila had helped make, and it was lumpy and uneven and the best thing Lena had tasted in years. Francesca stayed for wine, sharing stories about Adrian as a child that made him groan and Mila giggle. And for a few hours, they were just a family. Messy, complicated, figuring it out as they went. It wasn't until after everyone had left and Mila was asleep that Lena's phone buzzed again. Another message from Marco Russo's number. 2 days left. "I hope you're thinking clearly, for your daughter's sake." The implied threat made her stomach turn. She showed it to Adrian this time, watching his face go hard as he read. "That's it," he said. "I'm moving up the timeline." "What timeline?" "The meeting. With Marco." Adrian was already texting someone. "If he wants to play games, we'll play. But on my terms, not his." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done from the beginning, end this before it gets worse." He looked at her, and there was steel in his gaze. "You were right. About trying something different. But if talking doesn't work, we do this my father's way." The promise hung in the air like a blade. Lena wanted to argue, to push back, to insist there had to be another option. But she thought about that text, about the veiled threats, about Mila sleeping peacefully in the next room. Sometimes, maybe, there wasn't another way. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow." "He wants information? He can get it directly from me." Adrian's voice was cold, controlled. "And if he tries to use you again, he'll learn exactly why that was a mistake." The meeting was set for noon at a neutral location, a restaurant in the Loop owned by neither family, expensive enough that violence would be discouraged by the kind of clientele who valued discretion over drama. Adrian left the penthouse at 11, his face a mask of controlled determination that made Lena's stomach knot. "Stay here," he'd said, checking his phone for the third time. "Carter's posted downstairs. Gianna's on her way. Don't open the door for anyone else. Be careful." He'd paused at the elevator, looked back at her with something complicated in his eyes. "Always am." But that wasn't true, and they both knew it. Careful men didn't walk into restaurants with their enemies. Careful men didn't try to negotiate when violence was easier. Gianna arrived 20 minutes later with more Italian children's books and the kind of cheerful energy that seemed designed to mask worry. She set Mila up with stories and coloring books while Lena paced the living room, checking her phone every 30 seconds for updates that didn't come. "He'll be fine," Gianna said from the couch. "Adrian knows what he's doing." "Does he?" "He's been preparing for this his whole life, taking over the family business, dealing with rivals, navigating my father's expectations." She paused. "Though I'll admit, he's handling it differently than I expected." "What do you mean?" Gianna gestured vaguely at the apartment, at Mila coloring peacefully on the floor. You. A month ago, he would have already ended the Russo problem permanently, but now he's trying diplomacy. That's new? You think that's a mistake? I think it's brave, and probably harder than the alternative. Gianna's voice softened. My brother's not used to caring about consequences. He is now. The words settled over Lena like a weight. She thought about Adrian reading bedtime stories, checking Mila's fever, standing on the balcony and admitting he was terrified of failing. He was trying to be different. Whether it would work was another question entirely. Her phone finally buzzed at 1:15. A text from Adrian. It's handled. Coming home. 2 words that could mean anything. Lena tried to parse tone from text, failed, and went back to pacing. Gianna watched her with sympathy that made everything worse. You care about him, she said. Not a question. I care about what happens to Mila if something goes wrong. That's not what I asked. Lena stopped pacing. I don't know what I feel. 6 years ago, I loved him enough to run because I thought staying would destroy us both. Now I'm back and he's different and I'm different, and there's a child between us who deserves better than our mess. Children don't need perfect, Gianna said. They need present, and you're both showing up. That counts. Before Lena could respond, the elevator chimed. Adrian stepped out and he looked tired but unharmed. Lena felt something in her chest unclench. How did it go? She asked. Better than expected. Worse than I hoped. Adrian moved to the kitchen, poured himself water. Marco wants the Southside contracts. I told him he could have 2 of the 3. Split territory, split profits. He wasn't thrilled, but he's considering it. That's good, isn't it? It's a start, but my father's going to lose his mind when he finds out I gave up ground. Adrian drained the glass, and Marco made it clear. Any more approaches to you or Mila and the deal's off. Permanently. Did he apologize? Men like Marco don't apologize, but he backed off. That's enough. Gianna stood, gathering her things. I should go. Let you 2 talk. She kissed Mila's head. See you soon, little one. After she left, the apartment felt too quiet. Mila was absorbed in her coloring. Adrian stood by the windows, tension radiating off him despite the apparent success of the meeting. Lena moved to stand beside him. "What aren't you telling me?" Adrian was silent for a long moment. "My father called during lunch. He knows about the meeting, about the proposed deal." And? "And he's coming here, tomorrow. He wants to discuss the Russo situation and our living arrangement, and apparently everything else he thinks I'm handling wrong." Adrian's voice was flat. "It's going to be ugly." "How ugly?" "Vincent Morello showing up unannounced ugly, which means he's either going to try to take control or disown me for going soft. Maybe both." Lena felt cold. "What do we do?" "We present a united front. Show him that this arrangement isn't some temporary thing, that you and Mila are part of the family now." Adrian finally looked at her. "Can you do that? Stand next to me while he tries to tear everything apart?" The question hung heavy. Lena thought about running. 6 years ago, she would have been packing already. But she looked at Mila, happily coloring, completely unaware of the storm gathering, and she thought about Adrian, trying so hard to be different than his father while carrying the weight of family expectations. "Yeah," she said, "I can do that." Vincent Morello arrived at 9 the next morning with the subtlety of an invading army. 2 security guards came up first, swept the apartment like they were checking for explosives. Then Vincent himself, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Lena's car used to, his expression carved from granite. "Adrian?" No warmth, no greeting, just acknowledgement. "Father," Adrian's voice was equally cold. "You didn't need to bring security." "I go everywhere with security. You should too." Vincent's gaze swept the apartment, landing on Lena with assessment that made her feel like livestock being evaluated. "Ms. Voss, still here, I see." "Still here," Lena confirmed, lifting her chin. "And where's my granddaughter?" "Bedroom, watching cartoons." Adrian moved to block Vincent's path. "We need to talk first." "About your deal with the Russos." "I'm aware." Vincent's voice could have cut steel. "You gave away territory that 3 generations of Morellos fought to acquire, without consulting me. I made a strategic decision to avoid a war we don't need. You made a weak decision because you're thinking with your heart instead of your head." Vincent gestured at Lena. "This is what happens when you let sentiment cloud judgment. You start making concessions." "I made a smart play," Adrian said, and there was steel in his voice now. "Marco backs off. We maintain peace. Nobody dies. That's not weakness. That's pragmatism. That's cowardice dressed up as strategy." Vincent moved closer to his son. "When I handed you the reins, I thought you understood what that meant. Leadership, strength, making the hard choices. I am making hard choices, just different ones than you would. Different doesn't mean better." They stood facing each other, father and son, and Lena could see years of conflict compressed into this moment. This wasn't just about the Russos. This was about succession, legacy, 2 visions of what the family should be. "Mila's changed things," Adrian said quietly. "Having a daughter, it makes me think about the future differently. What kind of world I'm building for her. A weak one, apparently. A safer one." Adrian's voice was firm. "I don't want her growing up in a war zone. I don't want her learning that violence is the only language that matters. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, I can live with that." Vincent's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those cold gray eyes. "You'd choose her over the family business?" "I'd choose a version of the business that doesn't require choosing." The silence that followed was profound. Lena held her breath, waiting for Vincent to explode, to disown Adrian on the spot. Instead, he turned to her. "You did this," he said. "You came back after 6 years and turned my son into someone I don't recognize." "No," Lena said, finding her voice. "He did this himself. I just gave him a reason. A reason to be weak. A reason to be better." She moved to stand beside Adrian. "You think strength is intimidation and violence, but it takes more strength to walk away from a fight than to start one. Adrian's trying to build something different. You can either support that or get out of the way." The words came out braver than she felt. Vincent stared at her, and for a terrifying moment she thought she'd gone too far. Then, impossibly, his mouth quirked into something that wasn't quite a smile. You've got spine. I'll give you that. He turned back to Adrian. Fine. You want to play peacemaker with the Russos? I won't stop you. But when it falls apart, and it will, you deal with the consequences. Not me. Agreed. And this arrangement, Vincent gestured at the apartment, at Lena and Adrian standing together. It's temporary? Or are you planning something permanent? Adrian glanced at Lena. She could see the question in his eyes, the uncertainty. They'd agreed to a month. But somewhere in the past week, that timeline had started feeling arbitrary. We're figuring it out, Adrian said carefully. Day by day. Vincent snorted. That's not a plan. It's the only one we have. Then you'd better figure it out fast, because this family doesn't do uncertainty well. Vincent moved toward the hallway. Now where's my granddaughter? I brought her something. He'd brought a dollhouse, an elaborate Victorian thing that must have cost thousands, and would take up half of Mila's room. She stared at it with the kind of awe usually reserved for religious experiences. It's so pretty, she breathed. It belonged to your Aunt Gianna when she was your age, Vincent said, and his voice was softer now. I had it restored. Thought you might like it. Mila looked at Lena for permission. At her nod, she launched herself at Vincent in a hug that caught the old man visibly off guard. He stood rigid for a second before his arms came up, awkward but genuine. Thank you, Grandpa. Lena watched Vincent's face cycle through emotions she wouldn't have thought him capable of. Surprise, pleasure, something that looked dangerously close to tenderness. When Mila pulled back and started examining the dollhouse in detail, he looked shaken. She's a good kid, he said to Adrian. Don't screw it up. That's the plan. Vincent left shortly after, his security detail trailing behind like shadows. The apartment felt larger once he was gone, the tension dissipating slowly. That went better than expected, Adrian said. Your father brought a dollhouse. Is he dying? Adrian actually laughed. No, he's just realizing that being a grandfather is different than being a father. Less pressure to make us into something. He can just be. Think he'll actually back off about the Russo deal? Probably not, but he won't actively sabotage it. That's as close to support as Vincent Morello gets. They spent the rest of the day in something approaching normalcy. Mila played with her new dollhouse. Adrian worked from home, making calls and sending emails. Lena read and tried not to think about the fact that their trial month was almost half over. That evening, after Mila was asleep, Lena found Adrian on the balcony again. They seemed to have their most honest conversations there, with the city spread out below and the night air cool on their skin. I've been thinking, Adrian said, about what comes after the month is up. Lena's stomach tightened. And? And I don't want you to leave. He turned to face her. I know we agreed to try this temporarily, but it's working, Lena. Mila's happy. You're safe. And I get to be part of her life in a real way. What about us? What about us? You said you're still in love with me, but we haven't talked about what that means. If it means anything. Adrian was quiet for a moment. 6 years ago, I loved you and had no idea how to show it. I was young and stupid and thought money and protection were enough. He moved closer. Now I'm older and hopefully less stupid. And I know that love is showing up, being present, doing the work even when it's hard. That's a pretty speech. It's the truth. His hand came up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'm not asking you to love me back. Not yet. But I'm asking for the chance to prove I can be what you both need, not just for a month, for however long you'll let me. Lena's throat felt tight. She thought about the past 2 weeks, Adrian checking Mila's fever, negotiating with the Russos, standing up to his father. She thought about the way he looked at their daughter, the way he'd tried to be better than his raising, and she thought about the flutter in her chest every time he got close, the way her pulse jumped when he smiled. The dangerous, terrifying possibility that maybe she could trust him after all. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of letting myself feel something, of getting hurt again, of Mila getting hurt. She met his eyes, of wanting this and having it fall apart. I can't promise it won't fall apart. Life doesn't work like that. Adrian's voice was soft. But I can promise I'll fight for it. For us. For whatever this becomes. He was close enough now that Lena could feel the warmth radiating off him. close enough that it would be easy to close the distance, to give in to the want that had been building for weeks. So she did. The kiss was tentative at first, testing, but then Adrian's hand came up to cup her face and Lena leaned into it, and suddenly 6 years of distance collapsed into this moment. It wasn't perfect. Their noses bumped, the angle was wrong, but it was real, honest. Two people trying to find their way back to something they'd lost. When they finally pulled apart, Adrian was breathing hard. That was probably a mistake, Lena finished. Definitely a mistake. But he was smiling. Want to make it again? She kissed him instead of answering, and this time it was easier. Better. Like muscle memory kicking in, her body remembering what her mind had tried to forget. They eventually made it back inside, to the couch, where they sat close enough to touch, but not quite touching. The air between them felt charged with possibility. So, Adrian said, does this mean... It means I'm willing to try, really try. Not just for Mila, but for us. Lena took his hand. But I need things to be different this time. More honest. More equal. What do you want? I want to work. Find something that's mine, not just an extension of your life. She paused. And I want to be part of decisions. About the business, about our living situation, about everything that affects Mila and me. Done. Just like that? Just like that. Adrian squeezed her hand. You were right. I can't expect you to trust me if I'm making unilateral decisions. We're partners now. In all of it. Partners. The word felt foreign, but also right. Like something they could grow into. I'll probably screw this up, Adrian said. Fair warning. So will I. Then we'll screw it up together. Lena laughed despite herself. That's romantic. I'm working on it. They sat there until late, talking about logistics and boundaries and what came next. Lena would move her things into Adrian's apartment, officially, not just as a trial. She'd start looking for work, maybe go back to school. They'd figure out childcare together, make decisions as a team. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. 2 weeks later, Marco Russo called Adrian to finalize their deal. The contracts were signed, territory divided, peace maintained. Vincent grumbled about lost ground but didn't interfere. The Morello family continued their business, just with slightly different borders. Lena started taking online classes in business administration, something she'd always wanted but never had time or money for. Adrian paid for it without being asked, and when she tried to protest, he reminded her that partners supported each other. Mila thrived. She spent weekends with Francesca, learning to cook and speaking Italian with increasing confidence. She called Adrian Dad without hesitation now, and sometimes Lena would catch them having conversations that didn't include her, private jokes, shared interests, the building blocks of an actual relationship. Carter continued training Lena 3 times a week. She got better at reading threats, creating distance, protecting herself. The skills felt less necessary as time passed, but Adrian insisted. Better to have them and not need them, he said, and she couldn't argue. One night, about 6 weeks after Vincent's visit, Lena woke to find Adrian's side of the bed empty. They'd been sharing a room for 2 weeks now, a development that had felt natural rather than forced. She found him in Mila's room, standing by her bed and just watching her sleep. You okay? Lena whispered from the doorway. Adrian looked up, and there was something raw in his expression. I was just thinking about everything I missed, first words, first steps, all of it, and how I almost missed this too. Lena moved to stand beside him. You're here now. That's what matters. Is it enough? It has to be. We can't change the past. She took his hand. But we can build the future, all 3 of us. Adrian pulled her close, and they stood there watching Mila sleep, her hair tangled, stuffed elephant clutched tight, completely safe, in a world they were still figuring out how to build. Thank you, Adrian said quietly. For what? For giving me a second chance, for letting me be her father, for trying with me even when I didn't deserve it. Lena leaned into him. We're all trying, that's the point. So, the next morning, over pancakes that Mila insisted on making herself with varying degrees of success, Adrian cleared his throat. I've been thinking, he said, about us, about making this official. Lena looked up from her coffee. Official how? Marriage. Eventually, when we're ready, he held up a hand before she could respond. I'm not proposing, not yet, but I wanted you to know that's where I see this going. If you want it too. Mila stopped mid-pancake. Are you going to get married? Maybe someday, Lena said carefully. If we decide that's right for us. Cool. Can I be the flower girl? Adrian laughed. Absolutely. And can we get a dog? Let's focus on one thing at a time. They finished breakfast, Mila's pancakes were lumpy but edible, and the conversation moved to other things. School enrollment for the fall, a trip to see Francesca's sister in Milwaukee, normal family planning that felt extraordinary simply because it was theirs. Later, when Mila was absorbed in her dollhouse and Adrian was on a call, Lena stood at those enormous windows and looked out at the city. 6 years ago, she'd run from this view, from this life, convinced that staying would destroy them all. Now she was back, and it was complicated and messy and sometimes scary, but it was also real. A family built on honesty and second chances and the stubborn determination to be better than their circumstances. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number made her heart skip before she opened it and saw it was from Carter. Training tomorrow at 9. And congratulations. Adrian told me you're staying. He's lucky. Lena smiled and pocketed the phone. Lucky. Maybe they all were, in their own way. Lucky to have found each other again. Lucky to have a daughter who demanded both their attention and made them better people. Lucky to be figuring it out together. Adrian finished his call and came to stand beside her. What are you thinking about? How different this is from what I imagined 6 years ago. Better or worse? Different. She took his hand. But I think better. Eventually. Eventually is good enough for me. They stood there together, watching the city that had brought them together, torn them apart, and somehow given them a second chance. Behind them, Mila was narrating an elaborate story involving the dollhouse residents and a dragon that lived in the closet. This was their life now. Imperfect, complicated, real. No guarantees, no perfect endings. Just 3 people learning to be a family, one day at a time. And for now, that was enough. 3 months later, Lena graduated from her first semester with straight A's. Adrian threw a party that Mila insisted on helping plan, which meant there were streamers in colors that didn't match, and a cake shaped like a book that was only slightly lopsided. Francesca cried. Vincent gave a speech about perseverance that was surprisingly heartfelt. Gianna brought her kids, and the apartment filled with noise and laughter and the kind of chaos that came with family gatherings. Speech! Someone called out, and then everyone was chanting it. Lena stood, feeling awkward and grateful and overwhelmed. I don't really do speeches, she started. Mama's shy, Mila announced helpfully. Thanks, baby. Lena took a breath. I guess I just want to say, 6 years ago, I thought success meant surviving on my own, being independent, not needing anyone. But I've learned that actually, the bravest thing is letting people in, trusting them, building something together. Her eyes found Adrian's. So, thank you, all of you, for giving me and Mila a place to belong. The applause felt too loud, but it was warm, real. When Lena sat down, Adrian's hand found hers under the table and squeezed. Proud of you, he murmured. Proud of us, she corrected. That night, after everyone had left and Mila was asleep and they'd cleaned up the remnants of celebration, Adrian pulled out a small box. I know I said I wasn't ready to propose, he said, and I'm still not, but I wanted you to have this. Inside was a necklace, delicate gold chain with a pendant that had 3 small stones, emerald, sapphire, ruby. Our birthstones, Adrian explained. Mila, you, me. I had it made after that first week when I thought maybe we could actually make this work. He paused. Consider it a promise that I'm in this, all the way. Lena felt her throat tighten. It's beautiful. So are you. She let him put it on, feeling the weight of it settle against her collarbone. Physical proof that they were real, that this family they were building wasn't just wishful thinking. I love you, she said, and realized it was the first time she'd said it out loud. I'm still figuring out what that means and how to do it right, but I do. I love you. Adrian's eyes went bright. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her then, soft and sure, and Lena felt something in her chest settle. like a piece clicking into place that she hadn't realized was missing. When they pulled apart, Adrian was grinning. Does this mean I can officially propose soon? Maybe, if you ask nicely. I can do nice. We'll see. They moved to the balcony one last time, their spot for honest conversations and hard truths. The city glittered below them, a million stories playing out in the lights. Theirs was just one among many, but it was theirs. You think we'll be okay? Lena asked. I think we'll screw up sometimes. Fight, make mistakes. Adrian pulled her close. But yeah, I think we'll be okay. That's not very romantic. It's honest. I'll take honest over romantic any day. Inside, they could hear Mila stirring, calling out in her sleep. They both turned toward the sound automatically, parents responding to their child. But she settled quickly, whatever dream had woken her fading back into sleep. We should get some rest, Adrian said. Tomorrow's going to be busy. When isn't it? Fair point. They went inside, locked up, checked on Mila one more time. Her room had transformed over the months, photos on the walls, her drawings taped up everywhere, the dollhouse in pride of place. It looked lived in, loved. In their room, Lena caught sight of herself in the mirror. The necklace caught the light. She looked different than she had 6 months ago, less tired, less afraid. Not perfect, but present. Hey, Adrian said from the bed. You coming? Yeah, just thinking. About? About how we got here. All the choices that led to this moment. She turned to face him. I wouldn't change any of it, even the hard parts, because they brought us here. That's very philosophical. I'm full of surprises. She climbed into bed beside him, and he pulled her close. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve. But tonight, they were just 3 people under one roof, building a life together, one imperfect day at a time. And somehow, that was everything. The last thing Lena saw before sleep claimed her was Adrian watching her with that expression she'd come to recognize, part wonder, part gratitude, part disbelief that this was real. She reached up, touched his face. It's real, she whispered, answering the unspoken question. I know, just checking. Check as often as you need to. He kissed her forehead, and she drifted off feeling safe in a way she never had before. Not because there were no threats or problems or complications, but because she wasn't facing them alone anymore. They were a family, messy, imperfect, figuring it out as they went, and that was more than enough.